Clean it up. That's what you're paid for, right?
He kicked the mop bucket, sending filthy water splashing across her legs. There, he chuckled. Now you've got a real mess to clean up. Stick to what you're good at, sweetheart. Her mop clattered to the floor as his boot slammed into her ribs, the sound echoing across the polished gym like a gunshot. The 40-year-old janitor gasped, clutching her side as laughter rippled through the room. 20 young athletes in designer shorts and shiny gloves froze mid-punch, their eyes darting between the man they paid thousands to learn from and the woman paid pennies to keep their training ground spotless. Maybe if you scrubbed floors half as hard as you beg for overtime, this place wouldn't smell like sweat, the trainer sneered, towering over her like a victorious champion. His muscles glistened under the bright lights, tattoos flexing with every arrogant gesture. To him, she was invisible. Just a single mom in a faded uniform, a disposable shadow in his empire of mirrors and money. The students shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke. Some smirked nervously, caught between their shame and their loyalty to the man who promised to turn them into warriors. She pushed herself off the floor, her hands trembling, not from fear, but from something she buried deep for years. Something even he couldn't see. He kicked the mop bucket, sending filthy water splashing across her legs. There, he chuckled. Now you've got a real mess to clean up. Stick to what you're good at, sweetheart. Sweetheart, boy, girl, maid. They'd called her everything but her name. To him, she was a joke, a punching bag without gloves. But behind the pain in her eyes lived 20 years of muscle memory, a storm she refused to unleash. Her son's future depended on silence, on swallowing humiliation day after day. But as the trainer smirked at his students, basking in the cruelty of the moment, none of them realized what kind of fire they had just poured gasoline on. By day, she was just another face lost in the crowd. But by night, Naomi Johnson became the quiet backbone of Iron Forge Academy. 36 years old, African-American, and a single mother, she wore her janitor's uniform like armor. The fabric was thin and frayed at the seams, yet it carried the weight of survival. Every evening, just after the last sparring session ended, she wheeled her battered cleaning cart through the glass doors, blending into the shadows while others basked in the neon glow of accomplishment. Naomi's life was measured in sacrifices. She worked 2 part-time jobs, mornings at a diner where she poured coffee for businessmen who never looked her in the eye, and nights at the gym where she scrubbed sweat from the mats of kids whose parents drove luxury cars. Her rent ate half her paycheck, utilities took the rest, but she never complained. Complaining didn't pay bills. Complaining didn't buy her son's school shoes. Every night while she mopped and polished, her 13-year-old son, Caleb, sat at the small kitchen table of their 1-bedroom apartment. His textbooks spread wide, his pencil tapping as he waited for her to come home. Sometimes he'd doze off over his math problems, the TV humming quietly in the background. Naomi hated that she missed those moments, but when she slipped her key into the lock at 2 a.m., Caleb would stir, lift his head, and smile with sleepy pride. "Hey, Mom, you're home." Just those 3 words gave her the strength to face another day. Her body carried exhaustion like a permanent weight, aching knees, sore wrists, the stiffness that came from scrubbing until her muscles screamed. Yet, beneath the weariness was a quiet strength, the kind that doesn't come from lifting weights or throwing punches, but from holding an entire world together with bare hands. Naomi wasn't flashy, wasn't loud, but she was unbreakable in the way only a single mother could be. At Iron Forge Academy, the students barely noticed her. She wasn't part of their world of sparring gloves and Instagram reels, but Naomi noticed everything. The way trainers cut corners, the way certain fighters left their chin unprotected, the rhythm of footwork, the mistakes that would cost them a match. She didn't mean to pay attention. It was just instinct. Old instincts she had buried long ago. Iron Forge Academy wasn't just a gym. It was a monument to wealth and ego. The place gleamed like a cathedral of steel and glass, sprawled across 8,000 square feet of prime city real estate. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over high-rise condos and neon streets, while inside, polished chrome fixtures reflected the shine of sweat and ambition. At the center stood the octagon cage, its black mesh glistening under spotlights as if it were a stage for gladiators. Rows of punching bags hung like silent soldiers, each one wrapped in leather so fine they looked more like luxury furniture than training tools. The walls were lined with glossy motivational posters, phrases about strength, dominance, and victory, messages aimed at kids whose parents paid $500 a month for the privilege of training here. The students arrived in the latest sportswear, with custom gloves stitched with their initials. They filmed each other's sparring sessions for TikTok, posting highlight reels before Naomi had even finished wiping sweat from the mats. Their laughter and bravado filled the gym, echoing against mirrors so clean they doubled as stages for flexing muscles. For them, Iron Forge was a playground, a status symbol, proof they belonged to an elite circle. And then there was Naomi. While they shadowboxed in front of cameras, she dragged her mop bucket across the glossy floor. While they sipped protein shakes at the juice bar, she scrubbed discarded tape from the corners. She moved quietly, almost invisible, her uniform faded and damp from bleach, her sneakers squeaking against the mats they'd soon step onto with bare feet. The imbalance of power was stark. For them, this was a temple where dreams of fame were forged. For her, it was just another battlefield for survival, a place she entered not to fight, but to endure. It started with a laugh, a cruel, sharp sound that cut through the clatter of gloves hitting bags. Naomi was crouched near the cage, scrubbing sweat from the mat when Derek Stone, the academy's head trainer, stopped mid-instruction. His eyes slid toward her like a predator spotting easy prey. "You missed a spot, sweetheart," he called out, loud enough for every student to hear. Laughter rippled through the group. Naomi kept her head down, scrubbing harder, but Derek wasn't done. He strutted closer, chest puffed, feeding on the attention. "Tell me," he sneered, "after all these nights watching us, you think you could last one round in here? Or are you just studying so you can teach your mop how to fight?" The students chuckled, some uneasy, some entertained. Naomi straightened slowly, rag in hand. "I'm just doing my job," she said quietly, trying to slip back into the shadows. But Derek wasn't about to let her leave with dignity intact. He grabbed a set of focus mitts from the rack and tossed them toward her feet. "Come on then. Show us what you've learned from lurking in the corners. Give the kids a laugh." A murmur swept the gym. Phones were lifted, cameras already recording. Naomi froze. Every instinct screamed to walk away. But the trap was perfect. Refuse, and she'd look weak. Agree, and she risked revealing too much. She bent down, picked up the mitts with trembling hands. "I don't think—" "Hit the bag," Derek interrupted, pointing to a heavy bag swinging nearby. "Unless you're scared." The word scared hung in the air like a challenge. Naomi sighed, setting down her rag. She raised her fists almost out of muscle memory and let her body move the way it used to. Jab, cross, hook. The bag snapped backward with a loud thwack, swinging violently on its chain. The room went silent. She blinked, realizing what she'd done, and immediately lowered her hands. But it was too late. The students stared wide-eyed. One whispered, "That was perfect form." Derek's smirk faltered, anger flashing in his eyes. Naomi quickly grabbed her mop, trying to retreat into invisibility again. But the question had already lodged itself in every corner of the gym. Who exactly was this janitor? The next morning, Naomi hoped the incident would fade, swallowed by the gym's endless stream of drills and sparring sessions. But Derek Stone wasn't the kind of man to let public embarrassment slide. His smirk from the night before had hardened into something sharper, meaner. The campaign began subtly. During training, he accidentally kicked her mop bucket into the aisle, forcing her to scurry across the mats while his students laughed. "Careful with the equipment," he'd say loudly. "We don't want the help breaking anything valuable." His favorite word for her was help, delivered with the same venom others might use for trash. Soon the insults grew bolder. He started calling her maid during classes, his voice dripping with condescension. "Watch closely, folks. Even a maid knows footwork matters." Students laughed nervously, some uncomfortable, but none brave enough to speak. The power imbalance was too great. Derek was their coach, their path to tournaments and online clout. Naomi was just the janitor. Then came the sexism. "Single moms are always angry," he joked once, staring straight at her while wrapping Tyler Harrison's hands. Guess it's what happens when no man sticks around long enough. The words landed like a punch to her gut, but Naomi bit her tongue until it bled. Caleb needed her paycheck. Pride wouldn't keep the lights on, but Derek's cruelty didn't stay confined to the gym walls. One night, a video appeared on Instagram. Shaky footage of Naomi's heavy bag combination, captioned, "When the janitor thinks she's Rocky. Know your place, that's your iron forge." The comments poured in like acid. "Stick to cleaning, lady." "Single mom trying to fight her bills." "Not opponents." "Bet she cries into that mop water." Hundreds of likes. Thousands of views. Naomi found Caleb sitting on the edge of his bed that Sunday night, phone in hand, tears streaming down his face. "Mom, why are they saying these things about you?" he whispered. She took the phone from him gently, her heart shattering at the sight of those cruel words reflected in his young eyes. She wanted to tell him none of it mattered, that people didn't know the truth. But what truth could she share? That she'd once been good enough to stand toe-to-toe with real fighters, only to bury that life under janitorial shifts and overdue bills. She pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly. "It's just noise, baby. Don't listen." But Caleb's voice broke against her shoulder. "I hate them. I hate that man. Why don't you fight back?" Naomi closed her eyes, swallowing the lump in her throat. She couldn't tell him the truth, that every insult she endured was a calculated choice. That silence was survival. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Caleb's school trip was coming up and she didn't even know how she'd afford the fee. Losing this job wasn't an option, so she went back the next night, mop in hand, smile forced onto her face. Derek smirked at her from across the cage, already planning his next humiliation, and Naomi, jaw clenched, whispered to herself, "Endure. Just a little longer." For Caleb, Naomi thought she had already seen the worst of Derek's cruelty, but the days that followed proved otherwise. Each night she arrived with her cart and her mop, he found a new way to strip away her dignity. It began with his emergency cleaning requests. "Naomi," he'd bark during peak hours, "wipe down the cage now." She'd have to drag her bucket across the floor as students sparred inside, sweat dripping onto mats she had just scrubbed. The crowd always noticed. Phones angled toward her, catching her bent back and weary face. Derek fed on it, flashing a grin like he'd scored a knockout. Then came the physical intimidation. During a demonstration, Derek suddenly yanked her into the circle. "Here, hold the pads," he ordered. She hesitated, shaking her head, but he shoved the mitts into her hands. At first, his punches were light taps, his voice loud as he explained to the students how even a janitor can hold pads. But his strikes grew harder, snapping against her arms with bruising force. Naomi winced but said nothing. When she dropped the pads, pain shooting through her shoulder, Derek smirked. Reflexes of a mop bucket. That's why some people clean and others fight. The insults sharpened. "Know your place, single mom. Stick to cleaning, you're not built for this." He made jokes about her working for pocket change and mocked the idea of her having any kind of skill. Each word stung, but Naomi swallowed them all. Rent, Caleb, survival. Those were the reasons she kept standing, but someone else had noticed. Coach Ramirez, the academy's oldest trainer, had spent decades in fight gyms. His sharp eyes had caught the way Naomi flinched, not like a civilian, but like someone trained to absorb impact. He saw how her hands instinctively curled into fists, how her stance shifted subtly when she stood near the cage. More than once, he caught her shadowboxing unconsciously as she wiped down mirrors. To most, she looked like a tired janitor. To Ramirez, she looked like someone who had history in the fight world. One night, after another round of Derek's public humiliation, Ramirez lingered by the locker room door. "You've trained before, haven't you?" he asked quietly. Naomi froze, clutching her mop. "I don't know what you're talking about." He smiled knowingly. "I do. That bag doesn't swing like that from someone who's never thrown a punch. Golden gloves?" Her chest tightened. Memories she had buried clawed their way back. The sound of bells, the rhythm of gloves on leather, the roar of small crowds. She had been someone once. A fighter, a competitor. Before Caleb, before her world unraveled. But Naomi shook her head, forcing a laugh. "I'm just a janitor." She pushed past him, unwilling to let those ghosts surface. That night, long after everyone left, she lingered. The gym was silent, lights dimmed, security cameras humming in their corners. She opened her cart and pulled out a bundle hidden beneath rags, a pair of worn, taped gloves, her only relic from the past. She slid her hands inside, the leather cracked but familiar, and stepped toward the heavy bag. Her first jab was tentative, but the sound, thwop, was music to her bones. Cross, hook, uppercut. The bag rocked violently, chains rattling above. Naomi's breath quickened, body remembering patterns it hadn't practiced in years. Sweat rolled down her temple, but her movements flowed with precision, each strike sharper than the last. In the mirror, she caught her reflection. Not a janitor, not a victim. A fighter. A storm contained in human form. She stopped suddenly, pulling off the gloves, heart pounding. No, not here. Not now. She shoved them back into the cart. Her son needed stability, not the chaos of a mother trying to relive a past life. But Caleb noticed the change. One evening, when she came home, shoulders tense and silent tears streaking her cheeks, he spoke up. "Why don't you fight back, Mom?" His voice cracked with anger and heartbreak. "You're stronger than him. I see it. I feel it. Why do you let him treat you like this?" Naomi sat heavily beside him, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Because fighting back could cost us everything," she whispered. "And I can't risk losing you." But Caleb shook his head. "He's already taking everything, Mom. Every night you come home hurt, every time I see those videos, we're already losing." His words pierced deeper than Derek's insults ever could. Naomi hugged him tightly, but inside, her resolve wavered. How long could she endure? How much humiliation could she absorb before something inside broke loose? The suspense thickened with every passing day. Derek pushed harder, his cruelty escalating, certain she would never resist. Naomi tried to remain silent, but the fire she buried burned hotter each night she trained in secret. Each time she wrapped her hands in those battered gloves, the gym had no idea what storm was brewing in its shadows. The only question left hanging in the air was not if Naomi would explode, but when. The pressure didn't stay trapped inside Iron Forge's walls. It followed Naomi everywhere she went. Each night after Derek's jokes, another clip surfaced online. Short, edited videos made her look clumsy, pathetic, sometimes sweeping floors in the background, sometimes holding pads while Derek accidentally smacked her too hard. The captions were vicious. "Single mom thinks she's tough. Janitor fighter 101. The views climbed into the thousands. Every cruel laugh online felt like another punch she couldn't block. Then the bullying bled into Caleb's world. One afternoon he came home with a ripped backpack strap and red eyes. Naomi dropped her rag instantly. "What happened?" He hesitated, but finally whispered, "They showed me the video, Mom. At school. They called you a clown. They called me Janitor's kid." His voice cracked under the weight of shame. Naomi hugged him tightly, but inside, rage churned. Derek wasn't just humiliating her anymore. He was hurting her son. At the gym, the atmosphere shifted too. Naomi noticed whispers trailing behind her. Staff exchanged nervous glances. Students lowered their voices when she passed. More than once, she caught someone staring at her stance, her movements. Word was spreading. People were beginning to suspect she wasn't just some janitor. She overheard two trainers murmuring near the locker room. "Her punches. That wasn't luck." The other shook his head. "If Derek's right, she's just trying to act tough." The uncertainty kept them quiet, but curiosity simmered. The tension built like a drumbeat. Every 2 or 3 minutes of her life, another reminder struck. Another insult, another smirk, another suspicious glance. The suspense grew unbearable, not just for Naomi, but for everyone around her. Each humiliation opened the same unspoken question: how long can she take this? And with every whisper, every viral post, every tear Caleb shed, the answer drew closer. The audience watching, students, staff, and now strangers online, weren't just asking if Naomi could fight back. They were waiting, breath held, for the moment she finally would. "Careful with those mitts, sweetheart," Derek said loudly, his tone soaked in fake concern as he circled Naomi during a demonstration. "Wouldn't want you to break a nail while pretending to be one of us." Laughter rippled through the students. Naomi kept her eyes down, arms steady as she held the pads. "I'm just here to clean, sir," she murmured, her voice calm, but her grip on the mitts tightened until her knuckles turned white. Inside, her chest burned, but she swallowed the words, clawing to escape. Derek leaned closer, his voice dropping just enough for only she could hear. "You think mopping floors makes you a fighter?" His smile widened when she didn't respond. Silence was his favorite victory. Later that night, Coach Ramirez found Naomi scrubbing the cage, shoulders stiff. "You don't have to let him treat you like this," he said gently. She shook her head, wringing her rag into the bucket. "If I fight back, I lose this job. If I lose this job, Caleb loses everything." Ramirez studied her for a long moment. "There's strength in restraint, yes, but there's also danger in letting a bully believe you're powerless. You're not powerless, Naomi. I've seen it in your hands, in your stance. You fought before." Her jaw tightened. "That was another life, one I can't afford anymore." At home, Caleb broke the silence as he pushed away his half-finished homework. "Why do you let him do it, Mom?" His voice trembled with both anger and confusion. "Why do you let him treat you like you're nothing?" Naomi sat across from him, her exhaustion etched deep into her face. "Because I have to keep this job," she whispered. "Because keeping food on the table is more important than proving I can throw a punch." Caleb's eyes welled with tears. "But you can fight. I've seen it. And every time you don't, it's like he's winning. Not just against you, against us." Naomi reached for his hand, her own trembling. "One day, baby. One day, he'll see who I really am. But until then, I endure." The unspoken words lingered between them, but for how much longer? The night Iron Forge turned into an arena, the air inside the gym was electric. Word had spread like wildfire. Derek Stone was finally going to put the janitor in her place. He made sure of it, blasting challenges and mocking videos across his social media. By the time Naomi arrived for her shift, the mats were already crowded. Students packed the edges of the cage, phones raised high, live streams ticking into the thousands. Derek grinned like a showman, pacing inside the octagon in his custom shorts, hands wrapped tight. "Come on, sweetheart," he called, his voice carrying through the room. "Didn't you want to prove yourself? Let's see what you've got." Naomi's stomach churned. She hadn't asked for this, but Caleb was there, standing just beyond the cage with Coach Ramirez's steady hand on his shoulder. His eyes, wide, proud, desperate, anchored her. This wasn't just about surviving Derek's cruelty anymore. It was about reclaiming her dignity, for herself and for her son. She stepped into the cage. No fancy gear, no bravado, just plain black shorts, her old gloves, and the weight of every humiliation she'd endured. A hush fell. Even the students who once laughed leaned forward, sensing something different in her eyes. 3 rounds, Ramirez announced firmly. "Touch gloves and keep it clean." Derek thrust his gloves forward mockingly. Naomi tapped them once, then settled into a stance that made Ramirez's heart catch. Balanced, sharp, deliberate. Not a janitor, a fighter. Round 1. The moment Ramirez signaled, Derek lunged, fists swinging wild, trying to end it fast. Hooks, jabs, overhands, each one thrown with brute force. Naomi moved like water. A slip here, a duck there. Every punch cut empty air, every kick glanced harmlessly off her guard. She didn't strike back. She didn't need to. The crowd murmured, confused. Phones captured the impossible. Derek Stone, their alpha trainer, missing over and over against a woman he'd called powerless. By the end of the round, Derek's breathing was heavier, his grin faltering. Naomi stood calm, unshaken, as if she'd barely moved. Round 2. Derek adjusted his stance, sweat dripping down his temples. "You got lucky," he hissed, charging again. This time, Naomi didn't just evade, she answered. A sharp jab split the air, snapping his head back. Gasps erupted. She followed with a crisp 1-2, gloves smacking clean against his jaw and ribs. The crowd roared. Derek staggered, fury twisting his face. He swung harder, but his form collapsed under desperation. Naomi's counters came precise, surgical, each strike a lesson. A left hook to the body folded him forward. A right cross straightened him back up. The audience was on its feet now, chants mixing with disbelief. The janitor was winning. Phones caught every second, livestream comments exploding. "She's toying with him. Her technique is flawless. Who is she?" By the bell, Derek's lip was split, his chest heaving. Naomi hadn't just defended. She had dismantled his aura of control. Round 3. Silence gripped the gym as the round began. Derek's eyes were wild now, pride driving him where skill had failed. He came charging, throwing a sloppy overhand right with all the strength he had left. The punch was telegraphed, desperate, a final gamble. Naomi didn't flinch. She stepped inside the arc, pivoting on instinct, her left fist arcing in a perfect hook. The sound was brutal, like a bat cracking against a watermelon. Derek's head snapped sideways, his body collapsing to the mat in an instant. For a heartbeat, the gym was frozen. Phones hovered, mouths hung open, the air still as death. Derek lay motionless, the king of Iron Forge reduced to silence by a single, flawless punch. Naomi knelt beside him, years of training taking over. She checked his pulse, lifted his head slightly, speaking quietly. "You all right?" It wasn't mockery, it was compassion, the kind Derek had never shown. His eyes fluttered open, glassy with shock. She helped him sit, then stood tall in the center of the cage. Around her, the silence shattered into an eruption. Students cheered, chanted her name, flooded their feeds with the clip that would circle the globe before dawn. Caleb burst forward, tears streaming down his face as he pressed against the cage, shouting, "That's my mom!" Naomi's chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, but inside, the storm had finally broken. She hadn't just won a fight. She had torn apart years of humiliation, in front of every eye that once looked down on her. The janitor, no one noticed, was a fighter. The world would never forget. The fallout was immediate. By sunrise, the knockout clip had gone viral. Millions of views across Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Derek Stone, once the smug face of Iron Forge, was trending worldwide for all the wrong reasons. Headlines mocked him. MMA trainer knocked out by his own janitor. Memes flooded timelines. Sponsors cut ties. Parents pulled their kids from his classes. His empire crumbled in real time, but while his reputation burned, Naomi's star ignited. Social media flipped overnight, turning her from a punchline into a phenomenon. Hashtags like Nash Janitor Justice and Nash Art Mom with the KO trended for days. Strangers flooded her inbox with messages of support, admiration, and awe. The woman, once invisible in the background, had become the center of the world's attention. Inside the gym, Caleb sprinted into her arms the moment she stepped out of the cage. He clung to her like he'd never let go, tears soaking her shoulder. "You did it, Mom," he whispered, his voice trembling with pride. "You showed them who you are." Naomi's arms tightened around him, and for the first time in years, the weight of survival lifted, replaced with the sweet, unfamiliar taste of vindication. But victory was not without shadows. Derek, humiliated and broken, was already plotting. Rumors swirled of lawsuits, of backroom deals to salvage his name. Some whispered he'd seek revenge, maybe even find a way to push Naomi out of Iron Forge entirely. Naomi knew the storm wasn't over. But as she held her son close, hearing the chants of her name echo through the gym, she understood something profound. No matter what came next, she had already won the fight that mattered most. Derek Stone refused to let humiliation be the final chapter. Weeks after his defeat, Naomi found herself served with papers. Derek had filed a lawsuit, claiming assault, damages, and emotional distress. On social media, he painted himself as the victim, twisting the narrative to win sympathy. For Naomi, the stakes were terrifying. A guilty verdict meant losing everything: her job, her savings, even custody of Caleb. The courtroom was a different kind of cage: wooden benches, glaring lights, and the heavy silence of judgment. Derek sat smugly with his lawyer, casting rehearsed looks of pain. Naomi stood with trembling hands, her heart pounding like it had before a fight. But she wasn't alone. Coach Ramirez rose first, presenting secret recordings he had collected over months. Derek's racist remarks, his sexist taunts, his cruel humiliations broadcast to students. Gasps rippled through the room as Derek's own words damned him. Then came Caleb. Small, nervous, but brave, he stood before the judge. His voice shook as he spoke of late nights waiting for his mom, of watching her come home bruised and broken, of the day he saw her video online and cried because he knew she deserved better. "She's not a fighter because she wants to hurt people," he said softly. "She's a fighter because she never gives up on me." The room fell into a hush. The judge's gavel struck, and with it came freedom. Naomi was cleared of all charges. Derek's case collapsed under the weight of truth. As the crowd filtered out, Naomi gripped Caleb's hand, tears of relief shining in her eyes. She hadn't just won a fight or a case, she had reclaimed her name, her dignity, and her future. Strength isn't about who can throw the hardest punch or who stands tallest in the spotlight. True strength is quieter, deeper. It's found in the people who sacrifice everything for those they love, who endure humiliation without breaking, who rise when the world expects them to stay on the ground. Naomi's fight was never about proving she was tougher than Derek Stone. It was about reclaiming her dignity, about showing her son that courage doesn't mean avoiding fear. It means facing it head on. The message her story leaves behind is simple yet powerful. Respect is not something granted only to the wealthy, the famous, or the strong. It belongs to every person, no matter their job, their past, or their struggles. Those who build themselves up by tearing others down will always fall, while those who lift others with quiet resilience will rise higher than anyone expects. Naomi's journey is a reminder to never underestimate the underdog. Behind tired eyes and worn hands may live a warrior's spirit. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of courage to turn years of silence into a legacy of strength. Months later, the cage that once humiliated Naomi became the foundation of her own dream. With the settlement money and community support, she opened a small MMA and self-defense academy, not for glory, but for those who needed protection most. Women, children, and the vulnerable filled her classes, learning not just punches and kicks, but the confidence to stand tall. On the wall hung a single motto: "Respect is strength." Caleb beamed as he helped with the sign-ups, proud to call her both mom and coach. Their future was secure, their dignity restored, their story just beginning. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. Naomi proved that dignity and courage can turn even the lowest place into a platform for victory. Her journey wasn't just about fighting. It was about showing the world that resilience beats arrogance, and respect belongs to all. If this story inspired you, share it with someone who needs strength today. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage and justice, because every underdog has a fight worth telling, and every voice deserves to be heard.